that I got the major modifications done to my whitetail head form, my pedestal head form for my deer, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to mold his antlers. And the big reason I'm doing this is something a friend of mine asked me about. He asked me, John, why are you mounting your deer just as just a head mount? Why aren't you mounting the whole deer? And my excuse was, well, my reason is, well, I really don't have any room for the whole mount. He's like, yeah, man, but it's the only deer you have a shot, probably the only deer you're ever going to kill. You should do a full mount. And I had already invested into the floor pedestal. I mean, I've bought the pedestal and all the habitat to go with it, the form and all that. Then I thought, hey, I know how to make molds and make castings. Why don't I just make a mold of my deer's antlers, have extra sets around, then if I get hold of a full-size skin, I can buy the life-size mannequin I want and eventually mount my deer as a... We're here today to mold my deer's antlers. Here are the basic components for mold making for the deer's antlers. And what we have here is a good calibrated scale, which I did pick this one up from Harbor Freight. So, and it's been working real well for me for weighing out, precisely weighing out the two halves of silicone rubber. What we have here is Platsil FS20. Now, FS stands for fast set. In a temperature of about 72 to 74 degrees, it'll set up in about, I don't know, like, has a 5-minute pot life and working time. But down here, it's about 65 degrees in my basement shop. I should get a little more time out of it. This is the Tin Thicks thickening agent. And this is what's used to turn this from a thick liquid into a thicker silicone that will be applied to the antlers using brushes and popsicle sticks and what have you. Now this is available through the Brick in the Yard mold supply. They're in Texas. The product in and of itself is Polytech silicone. It's very, very good stuff. This is very, very good stuff. I've used it for other projects and I decided to utilize it here. Mixing vessels, I'm going with these clear plastic mixing cups, which I got a ton of them from Sam's Club. They last a good long time. Here are the directions for using the Platsil FS20. As you can see, it has a pot life of approximately 8 minutes and a demold of 25 minutes. Like I say, down here I should be able to get 8 to 10 minute working time on it, and I should be able to demold it within, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour, I would say. But this is the instructions for using this product. Using any platinum cure silicone, even tin cure silicone, one must be aware that there are things that can inhibit the curing of the silicones, most especially platinum. They're very, very sensitive atmospheric cure silicones. The big thing you need to be aware of using this silicone, any platinum-based silicone, is to use a sulfur-free clay as your clay wall, as your mold wall, or in building up anything about the subject to be molded, or even the subject itself should be sculpted in a sulfur-free clay. With that said, Brick in the Yard sells this Polys 2500 aerosol release agent. It's very good. I've used it on molds in the past as a separator. In this case, however, with the deer antlers, I'm going with a product just simply known as MR15. This product I purchased from Silicone's Inc. several years ago. I don't know if it's still produced. You have to call them and ask specifically for MR15. Okay, this is what I'm going to be putting a light coating of on my deer's antlers. It's easy enough to wash off something like deer antlers with warm water and soap, and scrub it with a sponge. But this is the product I'm going to use, and I'm going to apply it with what's known as a disposable brush. But as you can see by the condition of this brush, I use it quite frequently. So let's begin to begin. First thing I'm going to do is make sure the separator is well distributed in its matrix. And this basically smells to me like white paraffin wax dissolved in turpentine. With that being said, I'm going to start applying this to the antlers and the skull plate and the surrounding wood. Very light coat, does not need to be heavy. Okay, this is a good product, covers well. The clay that's sealing the top of these antlers where they screwed into the wood support is a non-sulfur clay. It is Protolina, also available from Brick in the Yard Supply. It is a substitution clay for another clay that used to be made available. It's a substitute for what's known as clean clay. And I believe this is no longer produced by the company, but it has been picked up by another company who now produces it as Protolina. Now you want to be sure to get all around the antlers, and at some point I should say, I'm going to pick this up off the mounting stand so I can get the underside of the antlers covered with the separator. Now I don't think I'll need to do this for the silicone, because the silicone is thick enough and you can really see where it's being applied. I may lift this off the mounting stand for the simple reason of being able to make sure that my mold is complete, especially down here along the burrs where it's closest to the board. I'm going to continue with this process. Then it has to be put aside to dry. Now on my little buck, he's got this odd hollow in his antlers, and I want to be sure that I get the separator down deep into this little cavity. What caused this? I have no idea. It could be genetics, could be an injury. It's hard to say. But my point is, wherever you've got any kind of distortion in your antlers, you need to make sure the separator goes in. And in here, the bone appears to be very porous. Okay? So you really want to make sure there's no way the silicone can adhere to any part of the antlers anywhere. With the entire set of antlers covered, skull plate, front of the skull plate, and the base, I use a little flashlight to check to make sure there's a reflective quality everywhere, meaning that the set of antlers is thoroughly covered. It's here on the base as well. I want this to be able to be removed very, very easily. Also, you want to make sure nothing is sticking. There are no hairs from the brush or particles of dust that are on the antlers. Whatever's on the antlers needs to be removed now, otherwise it will become part of the mold. And you don't want that. You want a clean, crisp mold. Now, this mold will be brushed on the antlers in one piece. Will be removed by making an incision along the main beam on each side of the antlers. and possibly up a couple of the tips. I haven't decided that yet. If this slips off the tips easily after the main cut is made, that will be the only cut that will be made, and the support shell will be all that's needed to hold it all together. And so far it looks good. I'm going to let this dry for about an hour or two. I'll come back in about an hour and check it, and we will begin the molding process. Okay, the Plat Seal fast setting silicone is a 1-to-1 mix, low viscosity, and it is best if gloves are worn, and if you need to wear gloves working with silicone, avoid latex gloves. Your nitrile gloves are going to be your best bet. Again, I got these at Harbor Freight. You could get them from anyone who carries them. I'm going to mix out equal portions of this product. And I'm going to make 65. Okay. All right, 66, 67. Okay. And that's the part B. Now to add the part A. All right. It's got to come out to 132. Went back down to 66, so 132. There we go, we're getting close. It finds me local pros for free. These are prices and reviews. You can chat with pros right in the app. 132. Now we're going to mix this up and add a small amount of the Tin Fix. It's 132 grams. Shut off the scale. I'm going to mix this up thoroughly. You want to scrape the sides of the container as well as the bottom. You want to go back and forth, figure 8 pattern with mixing. All right, now the Tin Fix. I'm going to add just a few drops of Tin Fix. Putting 4 drops of Tin Fix in. I'm going to mix this up, and this will turn the thin silicone to a thicker silicone. Turn it to a gel, which is what I want. I want a thicker gel for application. Okay, here we go. Onto the antlers. I'm going to begin by applying it to the antlers, like so. Make sure it gets around the base, around the antler burrs. Put this in place. Like so. I want to get underneath all the way around. Like so. Okay. Now we're going to start applying it to the body of the antlers. Like so. I'm going to continue doing this all up the antlers.
And there is some speculation that he might move as much as possible to avoid those 5-4 splits because he understands that a Thomas Kavanaugh court is highly problematic, especially if they're ruling on issues of reproductive rights and other women's rights.
Try not to waste this. This is not inexpensive stuff. So I want to be careful not to waste any. I'm going to pull this off the base now, and I'm going to apply it underneath the antlers. All right. I'm going to continue applying this off camera. There's no need to keep camera rolling. I've gone to using a chip brush for application. I've put it down into the little cavity at the tip of the end of the antler beam, and it's getting thicker as we go along here. I'm going to continue to apply this. I'm going to get all around the base of the antlers. The second coating will be made even thicker than the first. I just want to make sure it's complete and all around. The main thing is to get this first application everywhere. It all connects now here and there, but it's really covering very, very well. Now I'm going to use the remainder in here on the skull plate. See how it's thickening up as we go along. Start going up the other side of the other antler. I'm going to coat as much of it as I can with a brush. I'm going to get it coated. Doesn't matter if it's built up thick. I want it to be coated. I'll get that brush hair off of there. Don't want that on there. All right. Keep going. I'm going to get it on the underside as well. I'm going to use the popsicle stick, or the craft stick, I should say. It's a big old craft stick to apply this. Make sure it gets to the underside of the antlers. Okay, it's really beginning to cure. Really beginning to kick. But that's okay. I'm working it. Just keep working it. And working it and working it and working it. And this is why you want to wear gloves. This is mighty slimy stuff. I'm just going to keep spreading it. I want to get it all around the rack. I want to get it on all parts of the antlers. I just want to keep spreading it on the surface. Once the surface is covered, I can come back and I can build up thickness. Right now I want coverage. I want to get the hairs out of the silicone. I want coverage. More than anything else, I want even coverage, complete coverage of the antlers. So I'll come back later and build up my thickness. Can't emphasize it enough. The main thing is to get it covered. Covered first, built up additionally as we go. I'll make sure there's no trapped air anywhere on the antlers. So I'm going to keep working it. It'll reach a point where it will no longer spread. That's when you have to stop. Or you can end up peeling it away, and you don't want to peel it away. All right. We've got a nice coating all the way around. Let me grab this stick again and add a little thickness down here. Where I want to make sure I get plenty of silicone along the bottom. See, it's beginning to peel away. It's beginning to set. So I don't want to mess with it too much longer. All right. Okay. And we've got the antlers pretty well coated by now. Very well coated, in fact. Oh, drop a stick. The silicone is pretty slick. Pretty slick stuff. Do not reuse a stick once it's been dropped. Now, as this is setting, I'm going to mix up another batch. There's a second coat applied to the right antler side. It's gotten thick. I'll probably go with a third coat as well. Right now I'm going to apply a second coat to the left side of the antler. Okay, each side now has got 3 coats of the silicone on here. It's really, really super gelled up. I'm just waiting for it to set. I think after this sets or gets close to setting, I'll put maybe another coat on here. We'll see. I'm not sure. I did put big lumps of it over the tips of the antlers because they're very thin. There are areas along the antlers, along the tines, that look a little thin. I may add a little more of the paste on there. I definitely need to add around the base of the antlers here. This needs to be built out like so. I think I have enough for like one more layer. But then if I need any more, I may have to go ahead and order some more. And I'll do that over the weekend. I don't know. Like I said, I'm really not sure. I'll see how this sets. What I've got here is an alcohol and Dawn detergent mix that I use for smoothing my caulking, my silicone caulking molds. So I'm gonna. It seems to be letting me slide over the surface. Now the hole over here is really, really well filled in. But this does seem to be letting me slide over the surface and smooth things as I go. Wherever I added the fresher silicone, it's allowing it to spread without sticking to the stick and without grabbing to the stick. It's also getting rid of the little, curly ends of the silicone that are like forming like hairs or anything like that. So it's allowing me to get a nice smooth finish And that's not always a big deal, but it can be, in that you don't want anything to catch up or grab hold of the support jacket that's made. That will be made with Bondo glass. I did that on a set of wildebeest horns I made, and it supported beautifully. Of course, that was done with a tin cure silicone. It did not hold up over the years. This, if applied properly, should hold up extraordinarily well. Even if I get 1 or 2 castings out of it, I'll be a very happy man. But I'm sure I can get more. I need to even this all off. It's real gooey now and gummy. I may wait until this coat really sets up before I go ahead and add an additional coat. Right now I'm trying to smooth what's here. And it's setting up rather well, very well in fact. It's setting up. So I know my weight mixture has been correct. Or I should say my weight measurement of the mixture has been correct. And it's just a matter of letting it set now. Like so. And it's doing really well. I'm most impressed with this product. I was going to make the mold actually out of silicone caulking. However, the formulation for that seems to have been changed. When I put the silicone into water, it no longer floats. It used to float. It no longer floats. So they screwed it up somehow. They screwed up the recipe, the formula. It sinks to the bottom. And that's not a real pleasant thing to see, especially with something like my deer's antlers. I mean, the antlers will never be, they'll not be ruined by this. You know, you can't really ruin the bone, especially it's had a separator applied. And the silicone will not be a permanent addition to the bone, no matter what. This will come off. Not really spreading it anymore. I'm simply trying to model it down, and that's working. That seems to be working very well. Yep, I'm going to give another coat. Certain areas where it looks a little thin, where I can see through it a little too much, and where it's there are little cavities formed in between. I'm going to give it another coat of silicone, but for now I'm going to let this set for a little while and come back to it. And here we have it. Nice thick layer of silicone rubber. I went over my Platsil 20 with some Platsil 10. It's a little more flexible, and it has a little longer setting time. And I used the Platsil 10 to even off any grooves that appeared, for want of a better term, any grooves that appeared in the silicone. I also used it to complete around the base of the skull plate here, down at the bottom. It's been filled in very, very well under the brow tines. I'd say we have a complete, I'm not going to bother to demold it until tomorrow. It's 9:04 in the evening now. I think it's time I call it a day. So, the reveal comes tomorrow. Good night. Good night. They gone? Good, that ought to hold, little bastards.
One, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
All right, now that the mold is complete and in really good shape, it's time to create the support jacket, also known as the mother mold. And one example I have here, beneath in front of the deer antlers, it's going to be made in this type of fashion, but this is a mold I made years ago. This mold is well over 15 or 20 years old. This is a mold for a large set of springbok horns. And down here is the casting of those horns. This mold was a latex mold, not a silicone mold. And after it was made, I heated it in my kitchen oven, and I vulcanized the rubber, which means I heat cured the rubber. Now you could do that with some silicones. It's not always necessary, but it doesn't hurt. It can be done. Now this mold was made with one unopened horn sheath, because this is really, really large, and they're very, very, very close together, as you can see. See how tight the horns are, okay? So there is one incision made on the back of one horn. That's this horn here. And this horn is left intact. This sleeve of the mold is entirely uncut. The one that is cut is this one here. And it's cut all the way through. It's cut from the bottom all the way along, not to the tip. I believe it ends right about here. But this is the kind of structure I'll be building to house the support jacket for the Whitetail Deer. The one thing that differentiates this mold and its support structure from the whitetail mold is that it had to be secured at the rear section of the mold. The reason is simply the growth pattern of the antelope horns. They come way back, all right? There's no place in the middle to be able to secure the support structure. Now, on the whitetail, of course, the middle of the skull plate is there's a large gap between the middle of the skull plate and where the burr of the antlers begins, so that's not going to be a problem. But this was just this had to hang out over its upright support, and it does need an upright support in order to properly pour the resin. And you can see the foot pad for this extends out as well. And this little cap, this was an old Bondo cap, I believe, or some kind of little plastic container. This is used to hold the hardware, and I'll probably do something like that with the whitetail, only because it's convenient. Okay, to start, I'm going to point out an interesting piece of equipment that is not very often used in taxidermy for whatever reason. And that is the contour gauge. And that's what I have here. This one is from Depp. I have another one here from Precision Components. This one here. Okay. And I have a metal contour gauge. This is from General Tools. Now this is kind of tough to use on the rubber. You want to make sure you don't slice into it. But basically, the way these things work is you can take a contour tool, make sure it's flat enough, make sure it's click down flat. You can then take it to the skull plate and press it down over the skull plate, and this will capture the contour of the skull plate. That's the one from Precision Components. Now here's the one from Depp. Oh, QEP, I'm sorry. I thought it was DEP. This is QEP. And you press down, you get the entire contour of the skull plate. And that's what I did last evening with the metal one. Worked it over in place, and you get the contour. Now, why do you need a contour? You need to capture the contour of the skull plate, the top of the skull, So you can transfer that to a board to cut out to build the center part of the support mold, the support structure. Now before I remembered about my contour tools, I did a rough hand-drawn outline of the skull plate. And as you can see, my hand-drawn outline didn't exactly jive with the actual contour of the skull plate, which is why these things are so important. Quite a difference between the two. Quite a difference between the two. So what I'll do now is flip this around, lay this on the wood, and trace out the actual contour with my pencil. And when you trace the pattern out onto the wood, you want to be sure not to press too hard against the contour tool, or you can conceivably move these pegs, and that's not what you want to do. So now we've got a properly done and accurate contour. This will be cut out with a jigsaw, or if you have a bandsaw, cut it out on a bandsaw. My bandsaw is broken at this time. I'll be cutting it by hand with a jigsaw. Yay! There we have it. And now this fits perfectly. It didn't need to be an exact fit, but it needed to be close enough that it would fit evenly over the front and back. Now this will allow for the little wooden blocks. Yes, 62 years old, I'm playing with blocks. These little blocks here will be secured on either side with proper size bolts and wing nuts. As you saw with the springbok mold support, the Bondo glass will cover the outside, go all the way down to the bottom, and secure this little board right here to the center board, which will not be permanently attached to the Bondo glass. But this is the start of the mold, and we continue. And here are two of the upright braces drilled out with a 1/4 inch bit for 1/4 inch bolts. And they're clamped together. Be sure that the holes are drilled the same for each side. And this bolt goes all the way through, out the other side, and in between, sandwiched in between, will be the center board. And that is how this is secured to all. All they have to do is correctly determine its place, the center board's place on the skull plate, and the upright braces, their place on the skull plate. And at this point, a second pair are drilled through for the front of the center plate for the mold. Done and done. Now when clamping the upright supports to the center support, you want to make sure that these little boards are making contact with the base. And you want to make sure that you're straight. You want to make sure that they're even that they're in the same distance, so that the holes go through the holes on the other side. We want to line up the holes for the center board. And we want to make sure that the holes we've pre-drilled in these end pieces, these upright supports, meet on the other side. So the distance from the end of the board in, the end of the board in, must be the same. So that's going to be checked with a ruler. Okay, I have the main bracing accomplished, finally. It was really unnecessary to have both sides lined up. All I had to do was line up one side, drill through, and attach the bolts through the opposite piece. I made it harder than it had to be. So live and learn. Live and learn that I am an idiot at times. Now the next piece to be assembled is a cross piece for the antlers. This will hold the front of the mold steady. Okay, now in order to do this, I'm going to have to attach some little pieces that will be part of the mother mold and then simply bolt into this center support. So that's the next part of this project. You don't need to see me drill holes and bolt it together. It's like watching paint dry, and we know how boring that can be. Okay, I went out and I ripped the full width of the 1x4. I got it down to about 2 1/8 inches wide. I've got the little spacers. These little spacers right here will be attached to the Bondo glass, and I've got them clamped in place so I can then drill out a couple of holes on this end, and that will attach them to the main board. But for now, that's where we're at. Okay, we have the spanner ripped down, like I said, with the little braces, little elevator braces bolted into place, and they attach like so. And this will be glassed onto around the outside. The Bondo glass will come into contact and connect here with just this piece alone, and here with just this top piece alone. But there we have it. And it's better that I ripped this on my table saw, because it was banging into the center board. Now it's not touching it. Now there's plenty of room there. It's no longer touching it, no longer making contact. So it's in good shape. All right, I have a can of Smooth On Sonite Wax 2. This is a paste wax sealing agent. What I like about it, it's soft enough, unlike the hard paste wax you use on a floor, soft enough to get on a brush and apply. And I'm applying it to the wood of the base to keep the Bondo glass material from adhering to the wood. There's no need to put any on the silicone, because only silicone will stick to silicone. Bondo glass will not stick to silicone. Not permanently, anyway. I need it to stick just a little bit while it's being applied. But I'm going to put this on the wood that I do not want to be stuck to the Bondo. All around. Now I'm going to put it to the center board. I'm not worried about taking the little blocks off, because they need to be in place, and the Bondo will stick to this wood. But I do not want it to stick to this wood. So I'm going to coat the ends real well, as well as both sides. And another coating on the end, especially down at the bottom where the Bondo is going to make real close contact with the wood. I want it heavy on here. And this stuff is good. It makes it really, really slick. Okay. I will let this stuff set up. Now, I'll also apply it to the exposed spanner, or I should say the exposed wood of the spanner as well. At least where it's going to contact the antlers. Like so. Like so. Like so. All right. I'm going to leave this overnight, and the next thing to be done will be to work with the Bondo glass and actually get the mother mold created. Just like so. We'll let this all set up. Let it fully set overnight. Prior to starting the Bondo glass application, I've sort of temporarily attached the spanner board to the antler mold with black electrical tape. This will not be permanent, as the fiberglass will hold the little riser blocks on each end in place as we go along. And you can see here how it's all held in place. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to just simply make a couple of holes partway into the wood on the riser blocks to give the Bondo glass something to hold on to, something, give it a bite. Not going all the way through, but just making some little indentations in the wood. I'm going to do this on both sides, and I'm going to do it on the blocks, on the risers, on the antler spanner. Okay, what I have here are the ingredients, the particular ingredients to create the Bondo glass cradle. Mother mold, I'm sorry. Bondo glass, of course. Disposable Chinette paper plates. Plenty of craft sticks, tongue depressor size sticks, and of course the cream hardener. So, without any further ado, here we go. I'm going to mix up a batch of the Bondo glass. It needs to be stirred up first. See how the resin has separated from the fiber. So I need to mix this up first. Now I carefully measure out a prescribed amount.
Yeah, very careful, very prescribed.
Okay, that's a big bunch. That's quite a bunch, quite a batch, quite a batch. As you can see, quite a lot. All right. Now I'm going to add the cream hardener. I have distributed this within the tube. I'm not going to mix up a very hot batch because I need to spread this out. But I am going to mix it up enough. You need to make sure this is thoroughly mixed. You don't want to see any of the greenish gray color, that greenish color. You want it to be kind of a uniform greenish brown, but you want no streaking. You want no green streaks of the Bondo glass to show. So take as much time as you need to mix it up as thoroughly as need be. Now I'm getting ready to apply this to the mold. That's the next step. Okay, here we go. There we go. Now we need to apply this. We got to make sure the center board stays centered. It doesn't get shifted around as the Bondo glass is pressed up against it. Alright, now you can see I'm making sure that it's contacting the silicone, like so. Oh no, okay. Alright. Okay, now I've got this filled all the way around, and she's starting to gel up, which is great. I just want to smooth the Bondo glass around, even off around the base. I want to make sure full contact is being made with the wood upright supports all the way around. And I want to make sure that this is centered. Anytime it moves, you need to check it, make sure it stays centered. Alright. Now I'm going to work this down about midway on the silicone. Just going to use this as a modeling tool and model the fiberglass where I want it. I should say the Bondo glass. I call it fiberglass because it has fiberglass in the Bondo. I want to try and get a nice even edge for the mold. Where necessary, I can fold it over on itself, back down on itself, so that it lays properly. Right, the next thing I need to do is tilt this entire rig on its side so I can come up and around the antlers with the Bondo glass. I've now tilted the mounting stand over so I can apply the rest of the Bondo glass to this what would be vertical section without it all falling off. Now I've taken a piece of 18 gauge wire and bent it along the length and shape of the end beam and the rack. This is just to give a little extra support underneath, I should say, into the body of the Bondo glass. It's not always necessary, but I kind of like to do it. I just keep bending it until it all fits, just so. Then it will get locked down into the Bondo as I go. Okay, I start the additional Bondo glass on the tine, and I'll be working down the length of the antler. Just like so. Now, hold on a sec. There we go. I let gravity take the Bondo glass to reach about the midway point on each tine and a little around, because it can be taken back some. But I go like so, right up to the tip, and I now work my way down the main beam, and I make sure that this little metal support gets well blended into the Bondo glass. I want it in there. I want it as part of the support structure. And you can see how this is coating really, really brilliantly now. Now, again, this is not a very hot mixture. There's a little more in here than there was last time, I should say the first mix, but I would not consider this a hot mix. Now I need both hands to work this portion here onto the wood. Okay, this gets worked onto the wood, the little wood post support post and cover the wire as I go. Now this is really pretty easy. I mean, it's a stinky thing to do, but it's a very, very easy and pretty economical way to go. I'm going to finish this off and I'll come back on camera when I get it complete. Alrighty, here we are at this point. I'm going to take a disposable brush and saturate it with some alcohol, just simple rubbing alcohol, and try to smooth over any of the glass fibers that are sticking up. Well, too late. This is basically set. Okay, so here's the mother mold of the support cradle as it stands right now. Okay. Oh yeah, this has already gone through heat and it's already beginning to set. What I'm going to do now on this side, I've got some areas here where it's showing quite a bit of fibers and high spots, and I want to fill those in, like this groove right here, and I want to fill that in. I want to even it off a bit. I want to even off the edges, so I'm going to mix up another really light batch of the Bondo glass, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of smooth it out and make it look cosmetically very nice. That's what I want to do. Alright, now I have removed the electrical tape from this tine and have gone up over the tip with the Bondo glass. I'm using a disposable brush. I'm using a disposable brush that has rubbing alcohol on it and working the glass while it's still very wet and fresh. I've also added a little more to the end of the tip on the main beam and have worked the glass down onto the little riser board, and right now I'm smoothing all out. I'm making sure it doesn't wrap all the way around, but I do want it to securely cradle the silicone mold, which is its purpose. That's why this is a support cradle. And you can see now, as I work it with the brush that has alcohol on it, how it pulls back from the silicone. So Bondo in and of itself has really no adhesive qualities. It can be used to create a buildup, which is what this is doing, but it will not stick to silicone. Nothing really sticks to silicone. Silicone sticks to silicone. That's why you have to be careful when you're applying it on glass. Silicone will stick to glass. The main component of glass, silica. And there you have it. And there's that. Little fact. Factoid, as the kids like to say. Alright, there we go. That's built up real nice. They're built up real nice on the tines. The only one I think I need to build up a little more now is this one here. I'm going to add a little more along the edge. I want to come in about midway and over the tip a little more. This is, right now, this is rather on the weak side, right here. So I'm going to build that up as well. Alright. This is now done. I mixed this a little hotter than the others because it was just a small area and I didn't want to get a lot of sag out of it. I wanted to stay where it was put. So, I'm going to let this side completely set, go through its heat cycle and cooling cycle. I'm going to break for lunch, and when I come back, I'm going to continue working on the support structure on the other side. But here's where I'm at right now with this. Nifty looking, I'd say. Pretty good, pretty good. Looks like fingers. Okay. The support cradle is done. Been done all the way around. As you can see. Even did the back of the brow tines and filled in this gap in here right up to the centerboard. All right. So all the way around. Now this, I will let this sit now overnight, fully cure, and tomorrow, hopefully, I can pull off the support cradle and then pull the mold from the antlers. Fingers crossed, we'll see you then. Okay, time to remove the wing nuts and I'm going to remove all the wood, the support wood, the spanner, and the centerboard. I'm going to go ahead and remove all the hardware. Okay. It comes right off. Sort of comes right off. Alrighty. And you see from all that knocking around, this stayed put. Now, the next time I do a deer antler mold, I will stagger the placement of these bolts. They have to go through two different sides because the wing nuts are making contact. Now, wing nuts are used because they're easily removed and replaced. Now, if need be, I may enlarge the holes just a little bit to make removal of the bolts just that much easier. Need to gently tap the bolts to get them out. And I say gently because you don't want to damage the end of the threads to get the wing nuts back on. And I just simply grab with the pliers and pull them out. That's why I say I may go ahead and enlarge the holes just a bit, just a tiny bit, so that this isn't required. And I've got the hardware in the top of a Bondo cap. Okay, now I'm going to use a 5-in-1 tool, which is a little more sturdy than an ordinary paint scraper. I'm going to use this to work the sides of the mold away from the centerboard. That's working well. Turn this around and do the front. You don't want to just, yank the thing away. You don't want to snap anything. I'll get on the other side here. Ordinary paint scrapers are just a little too thin, I think. Now this needs to be worked. It seems to be adhering a little bit here to the baseboard, but we'll get the tool under it. It'll come away in just a minute or so. Get this located down at the bottom. There we go. I can remove the centerboard. Now I can concentrate on working away the support mold from the antlers. Okay, now comes time for the regular paint scraper to get under and just lift this up a little bit. It's kind of tight. We'll get this underneath. Here we go. There we are. See, that's what waxing the board did. It's just a little tight for whatever reason. Not a big deal. The next thing to do is to work the silicone from the jacket. Just loosening it up around the edges. And it will come away very, very easily from the edges, like so. You just work it with the fingers, just to get it loose from the fiberglass. May need to come along and snip or clip the edges of the fiberglass a little bit here and there. Other than that, this is working out real well. We loosen this up, and it makes it easier to slip this away from the antlers. Now I'm going to go with the looser side first. That's this side here. I'm going to work this away. Coming away nicely. Get it in with the 5-in-1 tool. Okay, now that I've got it loosened up around, I'm going to just start by gently pushing away from the antlers, and you can see it coming away. You got to be very careful. Now it's adhering right here up at the tip, so I'm going to loosen this up, get that off, and off will come the first side, just like so. Just like so. Wunderbar. Here is the left side of the antler. Cradle removed. Now this side is going to be worked by pulling towards me and jiggling it a little bit. And again, I need to loosen up this tip. Get it free. Now I'm going to push it away. There we are. Got it away. There's the second side. Removed. Now the next step is to loosen up the silicone mold all the way around the skull plate, the base. Get under here with a 5-in-1 tool. My little red devil 5-in-1 tool, just loosen it up. Loosen it up like so, like so, like so. Now I'm going to attempt to lift this off of the antlers without making an opening incision on either side, or even just one side. And I think the best way to do that is to first remove the skull plate from the baseboard. And to do that, I have to get underneath. I have to get underneath the mold and get in through the clay with a screwdriver and unscrew it from the base. This was screwed in from the top down, and then the holes were covered over with oil-based clay. Whoops. And I just scooped out the clay a little bit to remove this screw. It's a short screw. At the back of this is already loosened from the base. I just want to get the screw out of there. I want to be able to remove it entirely. get hit with pliers and pull the screw out. There we go, that's that one. And I'll get the other two, same way. Now what I do is I lift the silicone, get under with a modeling tool, and just pop this little bit of clay. This was Protolina clay. Pop that clay out of the tops of the screw sockets. Get in here with the Phillips head and simply unscrew the skull plate from the base. These are short screws. This is not going to be a big deal to remove this from the base. I'll do the same thing now that it's loose from the wood. We just reach in with the pliers, pull the screw out completely. Normally you could screw them from the bottom, but seeing as how this was a resin casting skull plate, I attached it to the board the way it would be attached to the headboard on a head form, from the top down rather than from the bottom up. Pull the screw out all the way. It's off the board, so we get the screw out. Makes it a little difficult. Everything is kind of slick and slippery. Okay, now the next thing is to go around and sort of rotate the silicone mold around all the tines just to loosen them, including the main beams themselves. I'm going to loosen this up. I might try to lift this right off the antlers, but I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah. Okay. It looks like I'm going to make an incision from the base to about this point here. But I want to make sure it's done in a location where the cradle will be holding the silicone in place. So I need to just make sure where I'm at. And once I'm sure, I mark it right along here. I'll make my incision. And on the deer, on the mount, it will be under here. And once the seam is sealed and sanded, you really won't see it at all. Now, rather than use an X-Acto knife or any kind of hobby knife that could potentially slice into the bone, which I don't want, I'm just using a real sharp paring knife, coming down and right through the silicone. So now I've got an incision made to cut through the rest of the way. I don't want it to break. Oh, there we go. That's one side. Now I'll make sure it goes far enough down to the bone. Hope this is being kept in focus. There we go. There we go. That's all I need. I believe that will be all I need to help remove or extricate these antlers from their silicone prison. Okay, I did make a slit on both sides. Now I'm going to work the silicone up over the ends of the antlers to get them off. Now this will take a while. I need to be down on a tabletop to do this properly. Okay, I'm going to work this very, very, very carefully. I don't want to wreck anything. I'm going to try to remove this. Now, you know what? This is a wide rack. So I think I'm going to extend the cut just a little bit, just a touch. We're going to extend it like so. And like so. All right, now let's try and get this off of here. I'm going to try and stretch it without tearing it any further. I may have to extend this. Yeah, I'm going to extend this even further. Are we going further, Father? Yes, going further, Father. Father, further. There we go. All right. Now I think we're good. See, the tines are tall on this little boy. I'm going to get this first one out. Hopefully it won't rip. It's got a good tear strength. I hope it don't tear. All right, there's one. That's one. That's the tall one. That's the tallest of them. Oh, good Lord. This is the side with the hole in it. Let's see if I can work this thing loose. All right. I'm just going to keep going until this is off. Okay. I've gone to the opposite side. I'm taking off the left side where it doesn't have that big, that really wide area that the right has at the tip. I was able to get the first two tines off here. Now I think I'm just going to slide it forward. Takes a little doing getting it off the original. It takes a little bit of ingenuity. Now I'm going to slide it off. Try and slide them off both tines at the same time. 2 times tine. I'm going to try. I don't know. Let's see how this works. I may have to slit this even further up than I feared. Yeah, it's going to start to tear if I don't. So, it will be terrified if I don't. So, there. This is just the mold. It's just a mold. Wonderful, wonderful. One side. This is why it needs a support jacket. You will never get resin into this flip-floppy little thing. Ha-ha! Okay, in order to get this through, I did have to slice down into that little cavity. So it's just going to have a little seam down the center of it, but it's so dark that during the finishing process, I don't think it's going to make a bit of difference in the world. That just popped out. You saw that. That just popped out of the socket. Now the mold is going to completely come off with relative ease. The rubber has good stretch. There's that. And she comes off the end right now. Mold is off. Oh, the rack is clean. My goodness. And I'll simply wash the wax residue off, and it'll be ready for actually mounting on the deer. Can't beat that with a stick, baby. There we go. There we have it. Always good to have a good sharp knife around. All right, there you have it. We have the original, the silicone mold, and the 2 halves of the support structure, along with the center support board and the spanner that will hold the antlers, the tips of the antlers in place during the casting process. The next step will be to demonstrate how to pour a urethane casting. Okay, now this gets worked back into the mother mold. The tines placed in their respective little holding areas in the fiberglass mold. Press this back in. Make sure it's good and tight. Check. Make sure she's in. Okay, that's one side. We get the other side hooked up, same way. A little trickier getting it back together than it was getting it apart. Nah, of course it is. What, you didn't expect this to be like super duper easy, did you? Hey, this is me we're talking about. I don't do anything super duper easy. No, really, this is really not all that difficult. If you're committed, and after this, you should be. No. Let me grab the centerpiece here. Make sure we have the front in the proper place. Like so. And grab a couple of bolts. One or two. That's all we needed. A couple of bolts back in place. Go ahead and secure them. This is why wing nuts are chosen over ordinary, machine bolts and nuts. Wing nuts allow you to get in there and just tighten it up quickly. Okay, another one here. See, the little plastic lid really does come in handy. There's just a little bit of Bondo that got onto the threads, but after a few uses, that Bondo that's on the threads will disappear. And make sure this is all pulled in tight. You want it to be as tight and snug as it was when it was first created, the cradle. Those are the 3-inch bolts. We take the 2-inch bolts and we reassemble, simply reassemble and this will help to lift. Notice how it has a little sag. This will help to lift this back into position where you want it to be. It's one bolt. And we bring it back together where it needs to be. Now, get this through. Come down and let it find its hole. Push it through. Push it through. There. Now again, the wing nuts will be put in place. They'll tie it all together. And the next thing will be, even before pouring, really, will be to make a center support structure so this could all be turned over upside down. And gravity will help hold these antler tines, each in their respective section of the cradle. And a little manipulating by hand will get the entire mold back into position, like so. It really is sort of that simple. I'll go ahead and create the support off camera. It's just assembling wood. You should know how to do that by now. And then once this is all back together, it'll be all lined up, and we'll go ahead and pour the first set of antlers. At this point, I'm nearly ready to start pouring the first cast out of the mold. I'd like to point up a couple of things before we start. The first thing, one of the most important things when I prep my silicone molds, I like to douse the inside of the mold with baby powder. Ordinary, everyday baby powder, also known as talcum powder. What this does, this relieves the surface tension. It releases surface tension on the interior of the mold. A lot of people who make molds, they go ahead and they start pouring their resin in, and you don't really need a separator. A separator is not really required with a silicone mold. However, you do need something to break the surface tension. Now, surface tension occurs when the liquid urethane plastic makes contact with the interior edges of the mold and traps air on the inside. Baby powder lines the mold. Okay? It allows the resin to flow freely, even getting down into the tips of these tines. Without it, you will find that you will have air pockets at the tips of the tines. You will be missing tips of the tines. I'm going to show how to powder the mold. This is simply a hair color dispenser that you can get from any beauty supply store. It's used for applying hair dye in specific places or hair color or highlights. I get mine from Sally's Beauty Supply locally. What I like about it, it's a squeeze type bottle, and this little nozzle allows you to get in close and push powder into the mold. Okay? Not only will it relieve surface tension in your mold, it'll impart a nice aroma in your shop. Okay? The other thing that I do before I will pour silicone into a mold like this, as you recall, the mold was sliced open to be able to remove or extricate the antlers from the mold, the original antlers. Now, after the mold is powdered, I'm going to seal that incision. It's a temporary seal. It's a very light seal. There's no glue made that can glue silicone together. There is one product that can secure silicone to itself, and that is silicone. Now, in this case, what I've got here, I've got a tube of silicone caulking, and this silicone caulking, if used, would need to set overnight. Okay? I'm going to mix up small amounts of the silicone that the mold was made with, and that of course will be the Platsil FS20. I'm going to mix up small amounts of this, and I'm going to apply it along the seam with a small spatula, a small stainless steel spatula. And this will, I will allow this to set. Once this sets, it's just going to be a fine film of silicone. Once it sets, the seam, the incision, will be closed and will be sealed. If you don't do anything to seal it, you're going to have leakage all over. And I'd rather not waste my urethane casting resin. Now, let me give a little explanation about the products that I use. Over the years, I've created a lot of miniature sculptures and molds of those sculptures. And I've created castings of my sculptures to reproduce them. Over the years, through experience, I have come to discover a little thing that I call cross-product contamination. Now, what does this do? Well, if you're using a good platinum silicone, like those from Polytech, like what I choose to use, using a lesser brand of urethane casting resin will eventually destroy the mold of a good silicone. In the past, I have used the Polytech Platinum Silicone to make flat open molds. And what has happened with those molds, we were pouring into them Smooth On casting resin, Smooth On 100 casting resin, basic casting resin. It's a good casting resin if you're using a lesser brand of silicone mold. What was happening, our molds were not even lasting a year. And we were getting very few pulls, very few castings from them before the surface of the mold began to deteriorate. Scratched my head and wondered what the hell was going on. So I asked my distributor down in Texas if he ever heard of such a thing, and he had heard complaints like this before. He couldn't understand what it was. And then he did a little bit of research, and I did a little bit of research. And come to find out that the Smooth-On plastics are a little harsher, not quite as refined as those produced by the Polytech company. So when I use Polytech silicones, I will use Polytech plastics. Now theirs is Easy Flow 60. They have several different brands. They're a few dollars more than the less expensive, than the more inexpensive Smooth-On. But I'm looking for longer lasting results. I'm not looking for immediate satisfaction. I want my molds to last longer. I want the plastic. I want a better grade of plastic that will not degrade in sunlight or weaken over time. The Polytech Easy Flow plastics answer all those questions for me. They do all that I want them to do without destroying the molds. Now, what other proof do I have of this? I've made molds with the Polytech 7325 Platinum Cure silicone, the same type of open face molds, and we started using the Easy Flow 60 in the molds. I have molds now that have been around over 3.5, going on closer to 4 years on some of them, and there is no degradation of the mold. The surfaces are still flexible, still fresh. There is something to this cross-product contamination theory that I come up with. That's why, yeah, I pay a little more for the Polytech silicones. I pay a little more for the Polytech resins. But tell you the truth, I'd rather do that than have to make this mold over again. Believe me, anyone who's watched this video knows rightly what was involved in making this mold. I do not want to do that again. Not with this set of antlers. A different set of antlers, sure, I'll make another mold. I will use the same silicones again. But cross-product contamination is not going to happen for me anymore. I'm going to stick with one brand. This is the brand I choose. You can use whatever you want. I'm just telling you simple facts that I have learned through years of actual product use. And I'm sharing that with you so you can avoid the same mistakes I made. Lecture over. Let's begin. First thing is to pull the mold off the upright support. And turn it right side up again. Next thing to do, we carefully pull the silicone mold out of the support jacket, and I want to open up the incision that was made in the mold. Now I'm going to take my powder in my little dispensing bottle here, And I'm simply going to shoot the powder up into the mold. See if I can get a better view here of this. There's no need to remove the entire support cradle for this step. In fact, it will help keep the mold secure if it's kept in place. Now I want to open this up so the camera can catch what I'm doing. Opening up the mold, taking my little dispenser that has got the baby powder in it, I'm going to give a couple of shots up into the tines, or the sockets, the openings for the tines. Now I'm going to pat the outside of the mold and distribute the powder so that it gets all the way down into the tip of the interior of the tine mold. And I'm going to add a little, shoot a little around, like so. And again, I'm going to tap it so it gets all the way down into the recesses of the mold. Now, using a bamboo skewer or a wire probe, just be careful you don't poke a hole, I want to go in. Well, let's start with the tip tine first. Make sure this is all the way down to the tip. Now, this is the side of the antlers that has that big defect in it, and you can see that right there. So I need to kind of move this out of the way. Looks like I might need to get a little more powder down into this tine. There we go. Tap it down. Make sure it's distributed all the way to the tip. Same thing with the first tine here. Let's get a little more powder to the interior of the mold. Get in here with the skewer, bamboo skewer, all the way down to the very tip, tippy tip tip. The nice thing about it is the flexibility can take a curved tine and you can straighten out the mold so you can get a straight stick or wire or metal probe down into the tine. Now that that's done, grab all the tines together and I simply jiggle the entire thing. I jiggle the powder back out of the tines, tap them back out of the tines. You can see the powder falling out here. Okay, now I'm going to take an inexpensive brush. I'm going to get in here, I'm going to brush around the interior of the mold and get the powder everywhere. I want to be sure I have full and thorough coverage. Full and thorough coverage all around. Oh, it smells much nicer down here now with the baby powder than it did when I was building this Bondo glass support jacket. I sure can tell you that. Another way you can check on your progress of the powder in the mold is with a flashlight. If there are any places that the powder hasn't reached, the light will reveal it. And I can see right at the tip on this one here, I need to get in there a little more and manipulate the powder around up into, this is a tough tine to reach, but just like so. And get in there, straighten out the mold so that the tine is straight. There we go. You can actually push against, gently push against the tip of the mold until you see it stretch, indicating that the tool is down at the tip. Now again, I'm going to bop this around, knock this out. And a lot of times as the powder comes out, it will also coat the interior of the mold. This is good. This is coming along real nice. Now to get the brow tine, same thing. I'm going to go in. I'm going to shoot some powder. Manipulate this around so I can get where I have to be. I'm going to get some powder in the mold. turn it over and try it this way. Oops, there we go. I think that's going to work. Yeah. Much better. Much better. Now I can reach the brow tine. Give a little stretch to the mold. Get this up into the brow tine where it needs to be. We find it first. There we go. And give a couple of squeezes of powder. Get the powder in there. Again, knock it about. Make sure there's plenty of powder in there. Take a look in. All right, give a little more powder to the inside of the mold down here. Brush it around. Just like so. Now I also want to get powder down into the first tine, the large main tine here. So the powder that's inside the mold right now is being knocked forward down into this tine with a little more added from the squeeze bottle. A little bit of, well, not really looking to tamp it down. I'm not tamping it down. That's not what I'm doing. Not tamping it down as much as I'm making sure it's well distributed down into the tine. Okay, now let's knock the powder out of here. It falls down into the, this is what was up in the tine, right here, this amount of powder right here. And I'm going to take this, distribute it with the brush. You want to get all areas of the mold interior with the brush. All areas. Okay. And I'm going to repeat all this entire process on the other side. After I turn it over. Oh, and you can see the powder has already reached through this area here. Okay, down at the base of the first antler we're working on. So I'm just simply going to make sure that that gets all around the burr. Like so. Okay. I'm going to pop a little more powder up into the antler opening. It's a lot easier when you're not trying to show what you're doing on camera. And then I'm just going to go all around the interior of the mold like so. Now this simply requires brushing it over the entire surface. Remember, this is being done to alleviate or relieve or eliminate surface tension in the mold. Okay. Now, go like so. We'll get this all the way down the mold. If you want to skip this step, skip this step, but you will have a lot of surface air bubbles to contend with. Or a lot of air bubbles on the surface of your mold to contend with. And they will have to be filled before you can finish. Now, you don't really need a separator. Silicone is not going to stick to anything that goes in it. And it really won't stick to the powder if any powder is left in, but you don't want to leave powder in the mold. You don't want to leave powder in the mold because you don't want it on the surface of your casting. And you certainly want to get it out of the deep details such as around the burrs of the antlers. That's why I use my compressor and I'm going to blow the excess powder out. Doesn't much matter. Simply blows the powder away and gives you a chance to set it up for the next step. And here's the setup for the silicone. I'm going to use what I have left of the Platsil FS20, the A and B part. I'm going to use a little, what is this, 1 ounce plastic mixing cups to stir the silicone up with. For my dispensing purposes, I'm going to use these syringes. Now these are 1cc syringes I purchased from an eBay seller or Amazon, I forget exactly where. They have no needles, but these are terrific for drawing ingredients up into the syringe. You're getting exact measurement, and then dispensing just as much as you want, just a little bit, equal amounts into a cup. And of course the little smaller craft sticks to stir up this silicone. Normally this is weighed out, but I'm going to try measuring it out, by centimeters and milliliters and whatnot. I'm not going to try and weigh this on the scale. I'm using such a small amount to seal the mold. We'll see how it goes. And just to make it easier on myself, I've marked the sleeve for each, A and B, and I marked a little A on the syringe barrel where there's no measures, and B where there are no measures. I've also marked A and B on the top of the plunger on the syringes. And because there is so little in the bottom of the jars, and I cannot reach down in here with the syringe without making a mess, I'm simply going to pour out a little bit into each one of these little plastic cups, one marked A, one marked B, and I'll draw the silicone out from the little cups instead of the little plastic jars. And I'm only going to draw out 0.3 milliliters of A and B and put them into a separate cup for mixing. I'll mix it with a stick. Like so. I don't know how well this is going to act. Hopefully it will set. I think such a small amount, the weight might not be critical. It's just A and B combined. We shall see what we shall see. I'm only going to do small sections at a time. If this does set in the time frame that it's supposed to set, I'll be very, very happy. Now I'm going to add 1 drop of Tin Thicks. Just a drop to thicken this up, just a touch. I don't want it flowing all over the place. I know you see it's no longer liquid. Now I'm going to apply this to the seam. Now, like I said, I'm going to apply this to the seam. Hopefully it's going to set. If not, I'll just have to wipe it off and do it, measure it, or do something else. Now here's the seam. I'm going to put together the seam up to maybe just past the point of that little dimple in the antler. So let me get the silicone on the tool here. And now I'm going to apply it ever so lightly to just the inside of the incision. Mostly toward the outside of the cut. I don't want to get silicone on the inside. I don't want the incision. I don't want the seam to show, is what I guess I'm saying. Now I'm going to smear it on the outside here to join it together. And I'm going to take the antler mold, put it back in the cradle in its proper place, and adjust by feel, adjust the silicone mold where it's supposed to be so that it's snug tight in the mother mold. Now I have to turn this over and get to it, so I'm going to do this off camera. Both tips have been sealed, for about an inch, inch and a half length. I'm going to grab a cup of coffee, and when I'm done, I'll come back, and if the measuring worked the way I'm hoping it did, it should be sealed. It should be closed off. We'll see how it goes. Alrighty, it's been a little while, and the way you can check if your silicone set, you get the cup that it was mixed in. Don't throw it away. Keep it on the side. And you can tell if you go into the cup with the stick, if it pulls up like this, that means it's cured. Okay? Well, let's see how the tip of the mold set at the incision. I'm going to start by, to put as less stress on the area that was just resealed, I'm going to remove the other tines first before I pull this out. Now, I want to see. Yeah, the incision has been closed. I hope the camera can catch this. But the incision has been closed. Yeah. Now this will be readily opened when I go to pull the cast out. This can be actually pulled apart to remove it. Or if I need to, I can just go over very lightly with a knife and reopen that. I'm going to check the tip on the other side as well. And again, I'm going to pull these out of their respective holders, and I'm going to gently pull this out and back. Let me check this side here. Very nice. Okay, this idea worked fairly well. Yeah, because this went down to here. This went down to almost down to the front. Okay, I'm going to apply more of the silicone to the rest of the incision on this one side, and I'm going to lock it back into the mother mold. Okay, I've gone all the way back to about this point here, and I've put a real good layer on that, and I'm going to let it set, and we'll see how it goes after she sets. After this end sets, I'll pull it again, and I will close up the seam from where it left off to approximately, I would say, to here. That's going to be where the gravity is going to pull the resin down the most. Up here, not so much, and I can actually coat. I can actually rotate this and coat it with the resin as it's poured. So I'm not real too concerned about the seam up at the top here. It's really held tight because it's the mold itself is very, very thick at this point, as you can see. So I have another stretch of repair done. You may have seen that the end was a little on the weak side. I reinforced it again as well, just in case. But this is where we're at with the mold right now. When that side's done, I'll get to this side and seam up the other side here as well. I will, before I finish this side off, this will give this side more extra time to set, and I will go after sealing up the opposite side right there. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at. Okay, the last bit of silicone gluing really didn't take in a lot of spots. So what I did was I removed what was there. It was such a thin layer. In fact, it was kind of too thin. I lined the mold back into the cradle and made a few drill holes where the seam is located. After that was done, I got in there with a fresh mix of silicone to seal these areas. Just these two right now. This needs to be extended a little further down. Okay. This needs to be extended a little further down. And this one here, I need to find out where exactly the seam is before I drill. These little access ports will allow me to make sure that the mold is lined up correctly. And that's more important than anything else. It'll also afford me a place to get in and apply some silicone. And this time I actually used my favorite little modeling tool. This little fella right here. Alright? I was able to get right in and model around where I wanted the silicone to be applied. I'm going to let this set. I'm going to let this set overnight. And tomorrow I'll continue to drill out the hole. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but I'm going to show it on camera, what I've done. Okay, I've covered the silicone mold of the antler silicone mold. I've covered it with a plastic bag, only because I'm too lazy to take the whole thing apart. I'd really rather not. I'm just going to go ahead and extend the access ports. By the way, the first two that I sealed with the silicone were very successful. This is a really large drill bit. I'm not sure of the size exactly, but it's a biggie. And this is just, the bag is just going to protect the silicone from the shavings. I'm going to go through these next two areas here that I want to seal. You want to make sure they're in the correct place for access to the seam, and I've already double checked it. Now there's one more here. Then I need to use the shop vac and clean up this mess. Alright, now let's get this crap all cleaned up, and then I'm ready to do the other side. Now that messy project is done, I've got the access ports all the way down on this side of the support cradle, as well as the opposite side of the support cradle. I'd like to point something out. The way this works is quite simple. When the silicone antler mold is secured back into the support cradle, the seams of the mold can be adjusted and lined up to assure that they close. Okay? And this can be done all the way down the entire length of the silicone mold. Make sure that the edges are tight against each other. That is then followed by the application of fresh silicone onto the mold through each of these portal openings. Okay, that's redundant, portal openings. Through each of these access ports. Okay, that will allow the silicone to set up, which after that's all set and dried, you can then pull the antler molds out of the support cradle. You can then apply fresh silicone to the additional areas of the seam, reinsert the support cradle, and you can then reinstall the silicone mold into the support cradle, and you'll have accurate alignment of the seams. That will allow the remainder of the silicone to set and prepare the mold for pouring the casting resin into the mold. So, with the little access ports done, the next step will be to finish securing the seams with silicone, setting that aside to dry. I have a fresh batch of resin coming from Texas, Richardson, Texas, from Brick in the Yard. Once that's here, I will be casting a set of antlers. One other thing you can do with this mold, the edges here are pretty damn sharp. You can file these a little bit. Just take off the sharp edge. I have already cut myself along this edge here. So, I don't want to do that again. So the edges will be dulled. I'll take a file to it and just dull it a little bit. File makes less dust than a Dremel. This side's not too bad. This side was the side I had to get the paint scraper under to lift. So this is very, very sharp. It's very, very thin, very, very sharp. So, a little bit of mold adjustment is what's needed. Then we're ready to begin casting. Thank you. You can then reinstall the silicone mold into the support cradle, and you'll have accurate alignment of the seams. That will allow the remainder of the silicone to set and prepare the mold for pouring the casting resin into the mold. So, with the little access ports done, the next step will be to finish securing the seams with silicone, setting that aside to dry. I have a fresh batch of resin coming from Texas, Richardson, Texas, from Brick in the Yard. Once that's here, I will be casting a set of antlers. Okay, I have about 0.8 cc's of silicone mix. I'm not adding any thickener this time. No thickener will be added. I just want this to flow onto the seam. No need for thickener. It's going to be very, very thin layers in each place. Put my little stick down. I'm going to grab my modeling tool. And here we go. Put a little bit on the end of the modeling tool and just apply it down onto the mold like so. Very gently. I do not want to disturb the seam. I want to coat it. I don't want to disturb it. Just let it drip on. Kind of pick it up like you're picking up something with a spoon and let it fall off the spoon end of the modeling tool. I'm going to go down to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Repeat the process for each exposed seam. And this should set up in about 10-15 minutes down here. It's about 62 to 65 degrees down here in the basement shop, and it should be a little longer than just the 8 minutes for it to set up. I'm just going to go along and put it all in place. See, I'm putting it on heavy, but then I'm thinning it with the tool as I go along. In other words, I'm spreading it with the tool. And this part of the mold here is very, very thick. And I'm going to continue on with the rest of it on both sides. And when next we see it, it'll be ready for casting. Okay, I've already gone ahead and closed up the remaining seams on the mold, and I'm just going to demonstrate real quick what I did. I pulled a section out of the mold, found where I had an opening, mixed up a small amount of the Platsil FS20, added 1 drop of Tin Fix thickening agent, and what I did was I went over to the area to be repaired, applied a little bit of the silicone, applied it very thick to one little area of the seam, reinserted the silicone mold back into the fiberglass cradle, and let it set. Now I did this all the way down the line, all around the antlers, the antler mold I should say. This mold is now ready and prepped for casting. That's the next step. For this project, I'll be using Polytech's Easy Flow 60 liquid plastic. It's a urethane plastic. This quart kit sells for about $44 for the quart kit. Now, instead of simply mixing up the resin and coming up with a white colored cast, I'm going to add a drop or two of the brown polycolor, okay, to the part B, the clear part. I'm not going to add a lot. I don't want a dark brown set of antlers, but I do want to impart a tan, light brown or tan or light tan color to the plastic. This way, during the finishing process, I have a nice base to start my color with, and if the antlers ever get scratched or bunked or rubbed, and the paint does rub off or get scratched off, beneath it will not be white resin. Beneath it will be a tinted tan resin. Much more natural for an antler. If you wash antlers, thoroughly wash antlers, they will never come up pure white, but they will come up much, much lighter in color. And when you recolor faded antlers, you're starting with a light brown color. That's what I plan to do here, is have a light brown color to start. All right, as can be seen here, you have some of the tips of the silicone mold for tines will release from the tip of the cradle, support cradle. So, in order to keep that from happening during the casting process, I simply go around with a piece of masking tape and help to hold it in place. Now the mold at the tips was nice and thick, if you remember, when it was being made, so holding it in place is not going to be too difficult. Just got to make sure you have a decent masking tape that will hold it in place. This is repeated on all the tines, especially at the tips, where there would be a tendency for them to fall away from the support jacket. And if you possibly can, avoid buying cheap shit masking tape like I did this weekend. Get yourself the good 3M, the good Scotch brand 3M masking tape. Now you don't want to make it too tight. You don't want to crush the mold, but you want it to be held in place enough. Now over here, I'm just going to put it on the tip. Then I'll put it around the other tines and a little bit around the main beams as well. And around this last spot here. The reason for taping this in place will become apparent during the casting, as the mold needs to be tilted to and fro, side to side, to ensure that the casting resin completely coats the inside of the mold. And this will just help ensure that the mold does not shift in the support cradle and that it holds in position. The last thing you want to do is have any of these tines dropping out, or any of the main beams of the antlers dropping out of the support cradle. Another thing I'm prepping for the casting, I have this heavy gauge aluminum armature wire, and I have bent it to fit in the mold, at least to get into the main beam, even part way. This will probably be inserted after the resin has been poured in. Of course, it's not going to go all the way down. I don't expect it to, because of the tight twist and whatnot of the main beam. But if I can get it in far enough that it will at least give some internal structure support to the main beam, there will be less chance of it possibly snapping during the unmolding process, which I seriously doubt is going to happen, but you never know. It's better to be safe than it is to be sorry. So, not having molded and cast antlers before, I'm going to go with safety and not worry about breakage. And as can be seen now, there will be one piece of wire for each side. And I just cut it with this heavy bolt cutter. Even though it's aluminum wire, it's a heavy gauge, and the bolt cutters make it a lot easier to cut it down to size. Easiest way to get the shape you want is to use the outside of the mold as a guide. It will only go down just so far because there's a tight turn, and there's no way to get the wire into the tight turn. But then we just simply install it like so and work it in, and it will go in just so far and no farther. And there we go. And those, like I say, those will be installed into the main beams after each side is poured, and it will be poured one side at a time. The center, the skull plate, will be poured last. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of drops of the brown polycolor directly into the resin. This will become a dedicated resin kit specifically for casting antlers. Now, I spoke with the owner of Brick in the Yard Supply, and we discussed it. He suggested using 4 drops. I'm going to start with 2, do a small test, see how that cures, and if need be, I can go to 4. I just shook this up a little bit. 1, 2. All right, what makes this tough is the plastic has created a static charge, and the drips have collected on the inside of the neck of the bottle. So I'm going to close it well. I'm going to tip it. Now, you can shake this up to distribute the color. The only thing you have to do is, before you use it, you must let it settle. Okay? You don't want to create undue air bubbles in the resin. Well, that's pretty brown right there. That's really brown. Now, I'm not shaking so much as well, I guess it is shaking, but it's more going end over end, really. And I want to get all of that dripped onto the neck and upper part of the bottle. I want to get that distributed. Now you can see bubbles rising in the product here. Let me see if I can make them show up a little bit. You see bubbles rising to the surface. Now all those bubbles have to set before the casting is made in the antler mold. However, I will make a small test casting in a little plastic cup just to see what my dried color will be. Okay, I've done 2 tests. The first test was with 2 drops of the polycolor brown, the brown polycolor, into the resin. And as you can see, what I got here was more of a off-white, not quite dark enough. I then added 2 more drops, this time using a syringe to put the color into the resin. I got better shaped drops, and I was able to put the tip of the syringe closer in past the neck where the static charge was formed, and it sort of grabbed the resin. Here I've got a more brown tinge, still on the very, very light side. So I'm going to add 2 more drops of the colorant into the resin. I simply draw it up into the syringe, put it off to the side, open the bottle, and be sure I get in close to the bottle. What I mean by getting in close to the bottle is I get down past the neck, 1, 2 drops of the colorant, immediately put the lid on, put the rest of the brown colorant back into the color bottle, cover the color bottle, I'll wipe this off the fingertips of my gloves. Now I can distribute this by giving it a good shake. This is very, very strong colorant. And I'll make another test. Now I can tell by how much is drawn up in the syringe, the color is going to perform a lot better. Now there is 0.6 cc's of each part A and part B, that have been put into this little cup, and I'm thoroughly stirring them up. And I will put this in a warmer room so that it will set quicker. But here's the color I have at this point. Sort of a color of maple syrup, I dare say. Let's get this in closer. Get a focus. About the color of maple syrup. And this will be, I think this, when this cures, this will cure to the shade of brown I'm looking for. Fingers crossed, gang. All right, I added 5 more drops to the bottle using the syringe. The third test casting was darker, but still a little bit on the light side. Just a little too light. So I'm going for broke. I added, like I say, 5 more drops. We'll see how this cures. I may not get this cast until tomorrow. All right, gang, here we are. These are the tests to date. This was the first test right here. That was 2 drops of the brown polycolor into the part A of the Easy Flow 60. This was 2 more drops used with a syringe. This was another 2 additional drops dispensed from a syringe. And the last but not least, this is the color that I got from dispensing 5 additional drops. So total we have 2, 4, 6, 11 drops. Now I'm thinking I may go with another 2 or 3, but this is mighty close to what I want. Remember, I'm not looking to make the color of the antlers. I'm looking to create a good base for the antlers, a base color for the antlers. And I do believe this is a good base color. I've held it up to my antlers. The only shade missing would be, as far as a base color, would be yellow. A drop of yellow. Now I have yellow, but it's smooth on product. It's not Polytech. And I'm not going to use it because of the cross product contamination I spoke of earlier. But this right here, this is a nice shade of brown for the base color of the antlers. It's a far cry from the nearly white color that was first produced. And of course, both of them are a far cry from pure white resin. This was the first color. This is the last shade right here. Quite a difference. Quite a difference. I'm very happy with this. This will go into the antler mold for sure. Now that the proper ratio of the brown polycolor to the part B of the Easy Flow 60 liquid plastic resin has been determined, I wrote it out on the label. Antler base, 11 drops, brown polycolor. When this is gone, I'll order another set. I'll order it by the quart because I believe a quart's enough to do 2 antlers. And I have an older set, an older kit, uncolored. It'll be white, and that will be used for the skull plate. We are ready to proceed. Okay, here we go. I've got a couple of small measuring cups here. These are older clear plastic cups. They're only an 8-ounce pour, which is okay because I'm going to put 8 ounces of each, which means it's going to be a 16-ounce pour down each side. Actually, I'm backing off the 8-ounce pour idea. I'm going to make a 6-ounce pour on each side. 6 ounces of part A, 6 ounces of part B. Before I put the cap back on the resin, I want to wipe off the threads where the cap goes. Just want to keep things neat. Just want to keep things neat. Okay, I'm going to put another 6 ounces, and this will be of the part A. And while it's sitting here like this, the bubbles are rising to the top from the light mixing of the product. Okay, I'm going to pour in part A first. And to be sure it doesn't spill on the outside of the cup, as the last bit is dripping, I simply rotate the cup and turn it back upright. Now I add the colored part, the part B. This is a 1-to-1 ratio of urethane resin. Very low viscosity on both. It's almost like thick water, I guess you could say, or maybe even skim milk or half and half milk, about that thickness. I'm going to pour down into one side, then I'm going to tilt the mold to make sure it gets everywhere. I'm going to rock it back and forth to make sure that the urethane product does not trap any bubbles. Even though there's powder in the mold, I want to make sure nothing gets trapped. Of course, you could see this is what I call a dedicated table for messy projects. The brown paper on this table is good for using spray adhesives on products and whatnot. I'm just going to tilt it, and I want to get slowly get down, get funky. I want this to get everywhere it needs to be. Okay, believe it or not, the darn antlers have been filled up. So, let me take this off of here. I want to rotate the mold. I'm going to spill out excess. And I'm going to rotate the mold. I want this to get everywhere in the mold. The little bit that's left in here, I want it to be everywhere. I'm going to pour resin back in the mold. Darn stuff is starting to bubble, so I got to work quick here. It's a pretty fast setting product. I can see it going into the antler tips. You can see the darkness of the mold. I'm going to tap on the tips a little bit to make sure the air is knocked out. Like so. And we're going to pull back, tilt it back, make sure it all runs out of the tips, and tip it back to make sure it goes back into the tips. And this might have been a little too much for one side. Put it back in the cradle. I want to tip the cradle. Keep the stuff flowing into one side only. And so far it looks like I haven't had any leakage, that's a nice thing. Now what I'm doing is I'm moving it around to the burr of the antlers. I want to make sure the burrs of the antlers are covered. It's starting to thicken up quite a bit. I want to wipe the mix off of the skull plate area. Yeah, it's very thick. It's like, okay, well, here it goes. It's in its final mix. There we go. Let's hope this got everywhere. Molding and casting is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And it is true. I'm hoping it got everywhere. I have areas that I can feel might have air trapped in them. I don't know. First pour is always tough to determine if everything got everywhere it was supposed to get. Plus this is thinner down here. This part of the antler is thinner. So it'll take a little longer for it to set. And it's really hard to determine with the light. I see dark on the inside, so I'm hoping it got everywhere it was supposed to get. No. The antler tips might not have any. No, I don't think they do. Oh wait. But I'm getting heat. That's the only thing about wearing gloves. You really can't you can't feel as well when you're covered. But I'm feeling warmth down the main beam, which means it's setting. Now, the tines are thin, so if it got down this far, it's going to be a while before this actually sets here. I won't know. I will say that mixing up 12 ounces of resin, 6 ounces of part A, 6 ounces of part B, was about 6 ounces too much. That's an awful lot of waste in that cup. I gotta try. I want to avoid that for the next pour. All I can do now is walk away from this while it sets a bit, and I'm going to let this one side fully cure before I pour the second side. A reason being, I'm going to check the mold really, really well, because I have areas here where I'm still collapsing the silicone, like on the tines. And I feel like they're strengthening up a little bit. I'm going to have to see what happens. I may need to go with a slower setting resin. This does set up rather quick. It sets up very quick. So I may need to go with Easy Flow 90, which has a longer pot life and a 1 to 2 hour demold. Now this right here on the main beam is beginning to harden up, but the tines, not so much. Well, I'm going to grab a cup of coffee and finish it up, and when I get back, I'll see what I've got on this side. Well, kids, I've let this thing sit for over an hour, and it's cooled to the touch. And pressing down on the tines down all the way to their tips feels like we're solid all the way through. Again, I will not know until I unmold it. But right now, I might have a good box of chocolates. I did, however, not install the wire. This is a very fast setting resin. I'm going to go ahead and pour the other side. I'm not going to put the wire in as well. Then I'm going to order a set of the Easy Flow 90, which has a longer working time as well as a longer demold time. I think the demold time on that is 1 to 2 hours, and I don't mind that. I don't mind that. I'm not slow. I'm not fast. I'm what I refer to as half-fast. Okay. And I would like to be able to get a wire into the main beams of the antlers. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and pour the second side. I'm only going to use half of what I used in the first side. I may get a better distribution too. Like I said, I'm not going to know until it's unmolded, but here we go. All right, I've gone and poured the second antler. Oh, she's starting to set up already. Okay, this is good. This is good. I've had just a little tiny bit of leakage, but I'm not really too concerned about that. The second side, I mixed 3 ounces of part A, 3 ounces of part B for a 6 ounce pour. And I believe I've got a real good amount of resin. There's only very little left in the cup this time, as opposed to the first pour, which I had half of what I mixed up, so very little. This is good. As I say, I only have a very little leakage right here. That's not a lot. This side might have had a little wider gap somewhere on the seam. I'm hoping that the tape kept it closed. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to let this set for a good couple of hours. Then I'm going to pour the skull plate area in here with uncolored. You know what? I might go ahead and use the pre-colored stuff just for the halibut, because it's a little shy at the antler burrs. It's just a little shy of resin at both antler burrs. So I'm going to go ahead and use the completely pre-colored resin. I'm going to go ahead and fill it. I might as well do that right now before she even sets. Didn't get the wire in, couldn't get the wire in. This stuff sets way too fast. All right, I've mixed up 2 ounces of part A, 2 ounces of part B for a 4-ounce pour. Hopefully this won't be too much, or if it is too much, hopefully there won't be too much left over. I'm mixing this up thoroughly. I'm doing figure 8 stirring, as well as all the way around, scraping the sides of the container. I can feel it already starting to heat up in the cup. I pinch a little pour spout. In we go. The reason I'm not too concerned about having the skull plate white for this particular casting is that this particular casting is like not going to be a wall display, and even if it was, it's such a short skull cap, a small skull cap, that it would go on a it would have mache modeled over it to create a proper look for an antler mount. I'm just going to have to hold this until she starts to kick. This should kick pretty quickly because it's real deep. It's a deep pour. And I may have to add a little bit to the front, but that's okay. I'm going to keep it tipped back like this so that the back kicks in. And here we go. She's kicking in beautifully. Now the back edge is right up to the top of the mold line, which is actually the underside of the skull plate area. And I've got a little paper towel jammed underneath the rise to keep it in position for right now. Just a balled up piece of paper towel. And when this completely cures, and you'll know when it's completely cured when the dark band around the very end where it's thinnest, when that completely lightens out. After that's done, I'll make up an exceptionally small amount of resin. I may make up a 1/2 ounce mix and then tilt the mold level and finish the pour. Here we go. Let's get this jammed in here a little better so that it holds. There we are. There we go. There we are. That's well. Come on, you turd. Get the frack in there. There we go. All right, that's good. No wires in this casting. Well, we'll see what happens. All right, now I'm sure that the mold is sitting level. I've got a 1 ounce mix put together. And this is simply to fill in the balance of the skull mold. Does not need to be a lot. I just want to make sure the mold was level before I did this. Let's put this in all the way across. Bring it up to level. Worst comes to worst, if it's a little over the top, it can be ground down with a belt sander, which is not a problem. Now this over here at the front, this may have been where some of the silicone leaked under the front of the skull plate originally when the mold was made. That wasn't really sealed. I could have actually had put that skull plate in a bed of clay for a better result, but I did not. So ask me if I'm concerned about that little area and you will get a resounding, nah, I'm not too concerned. Now I am going to push it up because there is a little bit of shrinkage away from the first part of the casting. So I'm just going to work that up a little bit. And here's what I have left over. I guess I could have used, I guess I could have used about a ½ ounce instead of a full 1 ounce. It looks like there's about ½ ounce left in there. But on the casting resin, I'm not overly concerned. Like I say, it's $44 for the quart kit, but that's a far cry from the expense of silicone. And yeah, you could go cheaper if you want in the products. It's starting to set up, but I don't want to go cheap, so I go with what I know works for me. All I can do is recommend it to you, and we go from there. And you can see it starting to set up right here. That's definitely beginning to set. Beginning to set up in the cup too. Here it goes. Color change is happening. It's almost magical. Now, what you'll notice about casting resins, the deepest part will start to kick in and cure first. The thinner part, which is the little bit of resin that's running up towards the back here, will take a little longer. All told, this should take, I don't know, 7 minutes or so to set up. And a little bit in the bottom of the cup is starting to set up as well. It's getting thicker. It's not going through a cure yet because it's not quite, what's left in the cup down is not quite as deep as this section right here. So, I guess this is skull making. I guess I'm a skull maker now. So, skulls and antlers. 2 bits. I'm going to start removing the masking tape from around the tines and main beams. I'm going to do the side I poured first. I'm hoping this went all the way through. I won't know until it's unmolded, but in the meantime, I'm going to continue to unwrap, unwrap the masking tape. We're going to untape the mummy and then let it sit a couple of hours. Then reveal what I've got in the mold, what went wrong, what went right, what I can do to make it better if need be. Okay, I found where the leak occurred. It's on the side with the deformity. Let's see how bad it is at the seam. Hopefully it didn't affect the exterior of the casting, but I won't know until it's demolded. Like I said, it's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, let's open her up. Let's see what kind of chocolates we got. Take off the spanner board. This one bolt is just a little tight. Okay. There we go. There we are. Wah, wah, wah. All going into a nice little plastic container for safekeeping. Let's use the pliers where necessary, but we get these out of their respective places. Okay, pull out the center section. And we'll start working it away from the casting. I'm going to loosen the tines. Turn it upside down. Try and kick it free. Be gentle. Don't be in too much of a rush to get it out. If you do that, you will break something, especially if there's a weak spot in the cast. All right, let's get this here. The tip. All right. You have to work it. Nothing worthwhile in life is ever easy. Here we go. Here we go. That's free. Yeah, there we go. One side. Put this aside here. Now this is going to be a little tougher. This is the side I had all the leakage on. Right here. So this may be a little more difficult to unlock from the support cradle. I hope not, but we shall see what we shall see. All right, nice and easy, John. Don't go batshit crazy. Ooh, pardon my French. All right, let's get this loose. Gently, gently. Ooh, boy, we lost a lot of resin here. We had a lot of resin come out. I hope I don't have a weak spot in the cast. I don't know. I'll take it apart and we'll see. Break where the seal is made. Oh, completely. The alignment is off on this first cast. The alignment is way the hell off on this first cast. Yeah. The mold didn't line up properly. Did not line up properly on that side. Let's try this side and see what happens. See how easily the silicone comes apart where it was just used to secure it. It was just a light coating used to secure the antler. Got a lot of flashing on this side. I don't think it's too bad. All the way down to the tip. And we'll get this off. Unlock the front of the mold. Here we are. Now let's pull it over. That's just flashing. I thought it was silicone. That's not silicone, that's just flashing. Well, there's a tine, incomplete. This tine is complete. It says a little air pocket right here. Actually, no it doesn't. No it doesn't. This little section right here, which I thought might have been incomplete. Right here, right here. That's not an air pocket, that's a little piece that's missing in the antler. Let's continue. There's no air bubbles on the surface. That's always good. That's always good. Now I'll go back to the other side. Pull this tine loose, get it free from the mold. There we go. Now the second one is coming, and the rest of the antler is out. It's a good base color. Good base color. Let's get this going here. Now this was really well sealed. I have to open that up again. Remember, I made a cut down the center of the deformity, so that was sealed. I'm removing the sealing silicone. Now, even though silicone will stick to itself, the fact that the mold was powdered prior to putting it back together is what's allowing the sealing silicone, the silicone glue that held the seam together, that's what's allowing it to come apart. And that may have been the culprit in not letting this completely seal. Okay, here's the first casting. It's a little worse for wear. Has a little left on it to be desired. Okay, the first rack. All in all, though, it's not a bad representation of my deer's antler. Here's the little defect in his antler, right here. That's well represented. Biggest problem with it is, go to the back side. The first side here is great, not bad at all, just some flashing. Easily to clean up. Very easy to clean up. This side, however, the seam of the mold did not line up in the cradle. I have one side higher than the other side. But seen from the front, it's not that bad. Now, if I wanted to use this for a mount, I would simply grind this down. This section right here, I would grind that away. Not a bad representation of my whitetail deer's antlers. Not overly happy. I'm pleased. The next casting will be better. I'll make sure that this all gets, that the seam is completely closed. And I'll make sure there are no other areas that will leak any. As far as cleanup, a little bit of filing. We'll get these little pieces on the surface that'll bring them down. They're so small though. See where they are. I say not bad. Not bad. Not the happiest of campers, but I'm not totally disappointed. And it came out of the mold without the use of the support wires. So I'm really happy about that. Really happy about that. The other thing I'm happy about is the plastic got to every single tip. There is no missing tine tips anywhere. Powdering the mold eliminated the surface tension, which allowed the resin to flow properly. All in all, pretty good. Okay, all those little knobs that were sticking up off the surface of the antlers have been easily removed by simple light scraping with this cartilage knife. It's as though the little imperfections that were caused from the way the mold went on too thick in places, it's as though they know they don't belong. I know this sounds ridiculous, and they're not fighting being evicted. And all I did was scrape along the antler with the cartilage knife, and those little rises in the surface have all disappeared very nicely, I might add. Now, what you want to be aware of is you want to be careful that you're not taking off actual little knobs in the antlers that belong, and you can only do that by comparing them to the original. And here's a few more, and they're just popping right off the surface beautifully without a whole lot of difficulty. They're just popping right away, and the surface is unblemished, I must say. There's a few little imperfections in the back here. We can get these off. As far as the seams go, these can be scraped down, and any unevenness in the seams can be worked over with a like colored epoxy, because don't forget that this will be painted too. This side here, I might take part of this down and then rebuild it using sculpting epoxy, epoxy sculpt or what have you, and get it going like that. This is not perfect, but it is salvageable, and that's the main thing. It is salvageable. And all these little knobs that came out of the mold are very easily removed. I'm surprised how easily removed they are. So, okay. I think I'm actually happy over this now. So, I've got a pretty good little gig going on here with this baby. Pretty happy. So here we have first casting, the droopy, sad looking little mold, the support cradle, which I will use cartilage knife and a few other things, tools to get this cleaned out, and I'll scrape this out, make sure there's no resin in it for the next pouring. I don't want that to jack the shape of the antlers out of whack by a buildup of resin. I will also wax the entire interior of the mold. No matter where it was good in other places, I want to make sure we have very little bit of leakage back here. I just want to make sure we have nothing else sticking on the next cast. But for now, it's a pretty successful job. I would call this nut-filled candy. Bye for now. Here's the first casting on top of my chosen head form. Okay, now to carefully close the seams, what I did was I lined up parts of the mold, wrapped masking tape around, and then secured it to itself. Not really so much to the silicone, it won't stick. Then I applied silicone all along the seam, smoothing it out, making it level. Remember, I don't want to build up a layer, I just want to seal it. So I built up a sealing layer using the popsicle stick and my modeling tool to finish spreading it. Then what I did was I came a little further behind it and did the same thing. Again, I secured masking tape to itself around the perimeter of the mold in one section, applied silicone with 1 drop of tin thicks to make it a thickened layer so that it would not run, it would stay where I put it. And now I'm going to take a break, have a cup of coffee, a couple of hours, come back and move on down and secure the mold all the way down the seam in the same way, so that I know I do not have the out of sync seam that caused that bad spot on the first casting. Alright, I've gone ahead and done something I consider drastic. I consider it kind of sensible. Now, I was able to get a good part of the, actually most of the seam closed with silicone, and just this part right here at the base was shifting and wanted to stay shifted. I took a couple of T-pins, drove them in from one side to the other. Now, before I put them in the support jacket, I'm going to come in with the side cutting pliers. I'm going to snip the tips off. I'm going to leave the pins intact during the casting process. I'm still going to seal the rest of this up. I still want it to be sealed up. I want this to be level and even, and I intend to get it there. But I want the inside, I want the interior of this to be absolutely even. Right now it is. When I push up on it, I can see where it separates, and it's even on the inside. So I'm going to seal the top of this with silicone. I'm going to keep the pins in. I'm going to repeat that. For the opposite side as well. I've got the tips already sealed. Not the tips, but I have the main body of the seam already sealed. And I'm going to continue to seal the seam here, like I did on this side. I've got masking tape to hold it, and then I apply some silicone. With the pins here, I'm going to be able to complete the silicone's glue all the way up the rest of the seam onto the bottom of the underside of the mold at the base of the skull. So that's where we're at. All right, I've put a T-pin through the wall of the mold down at the bottom of the seam, just before the antler burr meets the base of the skull plate mold. Now, this is what I mean about molding being like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You have to be bold. You make your first casting. Whatever mistakes you find, you correct before you make the next one. You don't just set up the mold and pour another one. If there are problems, you have to kind of troubleshoot them. Figure out what you need, get it corrected. The next cast will be a fine cast. And then just keep repeating the same things you did over and over again to make the cast correct. And it will work. It's nothing to be afraid of. Yeah, there's some experimentation. And yeah, it could be a little pricey. It could be a little bit of money involved to make the mold the way you want it. But to me, this is a lot of fun. And I'll tell you what the reward is. The reward is a casting that you can look at it and you can say, hey, that is dynamite. Now, the first one, like I said, it had its faults, but the antlers can be used. They can be used. And I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Alright, as you can see, the seams are completely sealed. And the reason is this whole pile of towels under it. I propped up the antler mold so that it would curve in a natural position, in a natural way, so that the seaming could be done all the way down. I left the T-pins in the base of the antlers. I did have pins throughout the rest of the entire length of the antlers every so many inches or so. And a T-pin. It only went through the wall of the mold, from one wall of the mold into the opposite wall of the mold. It didn't go through the mold. So there's no holes done to the inside surface of the mold. You can feel on the inside that the mold seam is smooth. This was done to both sides. And as you can see, the inside of the right side of the mold that was full of resin, that's been completely cleaned out, both on the inside and the outside of the mold. I used a combination of a cartilage knife, also a couple of my hoof knives, shearing knives. This is a farrier's tool. Works great for cutting away parts of things that you don't want. The excess resin that was on the mold, for instance. It's also good in reshaping head forms and life-size mannequins. There's a wide one, and then we have this one here. It's a little narrower. Nice sharp edge on the blade. It's a real good tool to use. I also incorporated the slim rougher. This is the narrow version of the stout rougher. These little teeth on the head helped me to clean this out. Really basically turned it to dust. And I was able to brush it out and then vacuum up the whole thing. After that, the mold was waxed using the Sonite wax from Smooth On. The Smooth On product. That was applied with a disposable brush all over the mold interior. I'll give it a second coating, as well as a coating on the outside of the mold, just to make sure. Then the silicone mold will be placed in the cradle. The whole thing will be assembled and ready for the next pour. Okay, I'm going to cut the T-pin short. I'm going to leave the bend on end of one of the T-pins so that the pin will be easy to remove. There we are. So now we've got a little head on here. And I can push this in further and push this in, and it will not interfere with the fiberglass support jacket. And then using the pliers on my Leatherman tool, I simply turn it in the direction I want and push the pin in. They're not on the inside of the mold, they're within the mold. I'm leaving these so that this does not accidentally get pulled apart when it's placed back in the support cradle. I'm going to wax the inside of the mold all the way up the tines. And on the outside of the mold. Well, the support cradle, the mold jacket, I should say. I don't expect any spills, but if there is, this will keep it from sticking to the fiberglass. That was a little tough to remove, but I got the job done. This next step needs to be done very carefully, gingerly, I guess you could say. We don't want to open up the seams on the silicone mold, so I'm going to put it in the cradle, going in upside down. Gently bring the cradle under, evenly all around, like so. Bring it into place. Lift it up into place. Open this up. Put the skull portion in. The skull portion into place. careful not to tear the seams open. I want to tear open the incisions. Carefully, gently, get it back into place. Takes a little doing. Got it out this way, it can go back in this way. Very carefully. Alright, skull cap portion is in place. Now we need to get the tines and the main beams in their respective places in the mold. Very carefully. Very carefully. Okay. Now I'm going to put the middle section back in. Back in place anyway. To help set this properly. Make sure I've got the front to back correct. There we go here. I'm going to turn it right side up. There we go. Alright. Now I'm going to let the silicone just kind of relax and set itself down into the support cradle. I've seen a couple places where it needs to be kind of tucked in for the night. Tip here. Yeah, once that's in, the rest of the mold follows. And then once this is tightened up, everything else will tend to line up. So now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the hardware onto the main support. Now, after waxing the parts of the mold where resin leaked out before, it actually didn't leak out down here. It leaked out up at the top where the seam was uneven and ran down to the lowest point, which was here, and then poured out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that these tines are covered. These lower tines are all covered. Well, they're upper tines when it's right side up, lower tines when it's upside down. I'm doing that on both sides. All right, now they've been covered with the Sonite wax. I'm going to do the same thing I did the first time. Masking tape all around. But instead of trying to wrap it completely around and around and around, I'm going to wrap it around because there's wax everywhere now. I'm going to just make sure it has a nice grip on the silicone, a gentle but firm grip, and tape it to itself. It will not stick to this fiberglass because it's been waxed. Doesn't matter if it's inexpensive masking tape like what I've got or an expensive brand. It will not stick. No matter how many times you wrap it around, the wax will get on it and it will get away. So just put the tape onto itself and go down as far as you can go and give it a snug hold like so. Okay, I think I'm ready to pour the next mold. Well, pour the next casting at any rate. Making sure this is all lined up in the cradle in the correct place. It's held down nice and strong. Here we go. Like the first time, I'm going to start with one side, this side, and last check inside, I don't feel any seams out of alignment. The seams, you can't even feel the seams. That's how well aligned they are. Half filled. Half filled. Take it out. Maneuver it around to be sure every part of the mold gets resin. Now tip it again. Pour the resin in. I'm going to pour it all in. The entire mix. Now, lightly tap on the outside of the support cradle. Squeeze the tines a little bit to try and get some air out. Like so. Keep it tipped. Make sure that it gets down to the tips of the antler. Put this in place. It should start kicking in any minute. Just knocking out any air that might be trapped anywhere in the mold. Making sure it goes down to the very tip. Put it back in the support cradle. And let the cradle sit at an angle. Bubble that needs to be burst here on the surface of the skull plate. Don't want that there. All right, it's starting to gel up. It's gelling up beautifully. Beginning to thicken. Beginning to go through a heat cycle. Okay. Now the resin is starting to kick. How well you can see that, starting to kick. Now while it's gelling, you do not disturb it. Let it rest, like so. Let it rest on its tines. Just hold it for a bit. I'm not going to worry about a wire. This is good the way it is. Second side. Halfway in. Got a little sloppy there. Wipe this off. I want that on there. I'm a little manipulating. Make sure it gets into every part of the mold. Bring it back down this way. And back again. This is the side that leaked the first time. And I'm not going to let it leak again. Back in the support cradle. Get the rest of the resin into the mold. Get this all in. This is the side with the defective little hole, so I want to make sure that it gets into all of the tips. So I squeeze these, make sure I squeeze out the air. Squeeze this one here, squeeze the brow tine, squeeze the tip of the mold, make sure it all got into everywhere. Now I knock it about a little bit. Just make sure I'm knocking the air out. Move this all about. I'm going to shake it all about. I'm going to coat the entire thing. Spill some out of the antlers. Coat the entire skull plate area. Now, replace the resin. Make sure that the antler burr is completely filled. The cups together, off to the side. No leak-a-dat. No leak-a-dat. Very good, no leak-a-dat. And this is starting to go through heat. Beautiful. I feel heat going all the way down the tips. And now she's starting to set. Very nice. Very nice. In the cradle. In the cradle. There we go. Tip it. Keep it tipped. Just keep it tipped. That's all you need to do. Keep it tipped. We'll let it start to set. All right, there's no leaking. Now I'm just hoping that it gets everywhere it's supposed to go. There we go. Just like that. All right, I don't know where it came from, but I have a little bit of leakage showing right through this little access port. Just a little bit of leakage. Didn't run down the entire thing. And it has not leaked out onto the table, so hopefully the seam stayed intact. May have been one of the smaller areas of the seams that was put together with a layer of silicone. Could have possibly popped getting it back into the support cradle. We'll know when it's opened up. I don't think there's a lot. Well, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see when it's opened. Okay, I'm going with about 1.5 ounces per part. I'm going to mix it in a little smaller cup this time. This is for the skull plate. This is for the skull plate. The leaking doesn't look as bad as the first one that was poured, so I'm not really overly concerned. I'll say you'll always get something on a seam like that. I mean, I spent several hours closing the seam. I would apply some silicone, make sure it was sealed properly, walk away for a couple of hours, and come back to it and add some more. Did that over the course of a couple of days. let the entire thing sit overnight. Now, let's make sure this is level here. Good that way. Good this way. Okay. Let's get this resin in for the skull plate. The first skull plate I poured was a 1 ounce per side. This one is 1.5 ounce per side for part A, part B, 1.5 ounce. And I think I need to hold this level. Yeah, I need to hold this level until she kicks. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to hold it until it kicks. That's about it. The base of the skull plate has set. It just needs to finish curing around the very edges. But basically, the level is set. And here I mixed up about 1/2 ounce of A and B. Mixed it together just to top this off. I want this to come up to the very bottom of the mold. I don't want to deny the skull plate any height. That's why that's been mixed up. And because of the heat coming through from the bulk of the skull plate resin, this will start to cure. Well, it's starting to cure right now as we're watching, which is a very cool thing. Now, the little bit of excess that's in the bottom of these cups, that's going to be poured back into the respective containers, then wiped out with paper towel. Now here you go, she's setting. You can see it beginning to kick in over here, where it's a little deeper, and it'll work its way back to the thinnest spot. I'm going to add just a touch more. And there we go. There we have it. Now time to clean up and let this fully cure, and then I'll unmold it. And we'll see what kind of chocolates we've got. Time to open up the box of chocolates. Do this by first removing all the masking tape. Feel like a doctor opening up the cast of a patient. Well, looks like we had a little tiny leakage right here. Let's see. Right there, just a wee little tiny bit. No, that's really nothing. Well, I'm going to go ahead and remove all the masking tape, take it off the cradle, take it off the support, open the cradle. We'll open the mold on camera. I'll pull these T-pins out of the base of the mold. Put that in with the hardware. I'll use them again. Okay. And let's see what we got this time. Open up the seams. The leakage is just minimal at best. Now, this was the side right here, the side with the defect that had all of the problems with the mold folding in on itself, rolling in on itself, and here all we have is flashing. That's wonderful. I'm going to open it up. Ouch. Flashing could be a little sharp. Be careful. Where do you think all these cuts came from? There we are. Here we go down here. Open this puppy uppy. And what's nice is you can pick away all of the silicone that was used to seal it, like so. The little bit of powder that gets on the outside of the mold when it's being powdered allows you to peel this away. And that's really a good thing. That's really a good thing. Now, that's what we got. Oh boy, come on baby. One brow tine, two brow tines. Oh, I was worried that the brow tines didn't get filled. The mold is real thick there, and it's really hard to determine by squeezing the mold at that point whether or not you've got filling. Looks like a good box of chocolates today. Okay, now here is the odd little defect on my deer's antler. That area, and we'll pop that out. Come on, baby. Pop out. There it is. Time to pull some more tines. We'll grab it. Let this slide out, hopefully. Give a little twist. And we pull. And ouch. I just opened a cut I had on my thumb. The tines are on the sharp side, for sure. Now we move it forward and off. This is the side that was originally turned in on the first casting. It's even all the way down. Real nice. Just requires a little chasing, a little finishing to get the flashing off. Same thing on this side. It's going to have to work the flashing away. Some filing, a little sanding, and you can see how that's how thin the resin is. Came through the seam, actually, and formed the flashing. But flashing is thin, comes right off. Oh, there we go. I had to open it up further down. Now she'll stretch and allow it the tines to come out. Here we go. And here we go. One, last, put on the side. Just some flashing. Nothing that's hard to clean up. That's mold making and casting. Well done on this one. Well done. This is a good set of antlers. Like I say, when you learn, after you make your first casting, you learn what you did wrong, and you then know what to do to make it right. Extraordinarily happy with this casting. The way this first set can be repaired is very simple. The base of the antlers of the mold I should say the base mold on the antlers, this section here, actually the front half turned under. It turned under, in on itself. The way to fix that is simple. There's two ways. You can mix up some sculpting epoxy. Try and match the color or not, it really doesn't matter. Lay the epoxy in the area to be repaired to fill. Take the mold, powder the mold, take the mold, and after the epoxy sets up a bit, wrap the front part of the mold around that antler burr and sort of form it. Trim away any excess. That's one way. The second way is to mix up the epoxy, lay it in the front part of the mold where it's weak on the casting, let it nearly set, peel it out, secure it to the antlers, model it into place, trim away what you don't need. That's one of two ways to fix that. But that's the first set of antlers. And here is the second casting of my deer's antlers. I'm real pleased, real pleased. Just a little cleanup on the seams, which is the usual thing to do when you're molding and casting and creating castings. They have to be cleaned up and prepped before painting. And like I say, there will be another video made on the finishing that's going to go on with these antlers. And that'll entail repairing the one set, making the repair to the one set I just mentioned, as well as coloring and finishing. So here we go. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I got a kick out of it. And we'll see you again down the line. Adios, amigos.